Senator Lamar Alexander credits bipartisanship for finding a way to pay for billions of dollars of backlog projects in the national parks. 10 News reporter Jim Matheny explains the plan and the reaction from park advocates.
Decades of inadequate funding in the national parks added up to a $12 billion to-do list of maintenance. That includes $215 million of work in the Smokies alone.
It's not just Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's the big South Fork National River and Recreation Area, the Obed Wild and Scenic River, Andrew Johnson National Historic Site up in Greenville, Appalachian National Scenic Trail. They've all got lists of maintenance needs.
Senator Lamar Alexander made a couple of proposals to fix the problem, both using money the government gets from energy companies that drill and mine on federal land. Barger says the NPCA supported the first pitch, which set aside an exact amount of money for 30 years and chipped away at the entire backlog. But that plan did not fly with fiscal conservatives. So Alexander came back with a second plan, based on a whole lot of what-ifs, and went year to year and only gave money to the parks if the government made more than it expected. The NPCA said that was way too much uncertainty. But now it seems the third time is the charm.
The current proposal takes the element that we were really concerned about making sure that we had dedicated funding, and that's included in this bill.
Alexander is co-sponsoring a bipartisan plan that will add up to $6 billion in 5 years and put that money specifically in a fund for maintenance. A plan that has support from both sides of the aisle in Congress, the White House, and the NPCA.
It is really kind of important to me that, we say out loud that Senator Alexander really deserves a lot of credit here. Somebody had to step up and really bring people together, and we're really gratified to see that.
In the Great Smoky Mountains, Jim Matheny, WBIR 10 News.
Senator Alexander says the proposal is on track to become law by the end of the year.